Hello. I'd like to let you know that this is a session that focuses on Actian and its related technology on how it's going to work on a critical market challenge. This market challenge is fraud detection and prevention. The disclaimer is necessary with so many products and third-party products involved. We have to face that things can change. So we're going to talk about implementing a common analytics platform for insurance industry use cases. My name is Louis Carr. Well, let's get started. Why even talk about insurance fraud if it's not a problem? Well, the obvious, it is a very big problem, both at a macro level and as a personal problem. Each year, billions of dollars are lost by government and companies to fraud. 300 billion per year in the U.S. for health insurance fraud, a smaller amount for non-health insurance, but still a whopping 40 billion. And the knock-on effects for fraud are very big as well, because it's not as if the government or the insurance companies are just taking a hit to their profits. No, instead, as consumers, particularly for private policyholders, that goes into the cost of the insurance policies. And then all of us as taxpayers, particularly for public health care, pay the bill. For the private side, obviously that means that it's harder to retain customers. And for the public side, it erodes public trust. And I say it's also a problem at a personal level because think of identity theft. We all know that every year thousands of people suffer identity theft. Typically, each instance of identity theft has an average cost to the person impacted by about $1,300. When that monetization of the identity theft takes place and it's in the medical domain, you're talking about a factor of 10, so 13,500. We're talking about tens of thousands of cases a year. It's gone over seven figures last year. We think the jump is largely due to COVID-19. And it's something that's much more likely to target the elderly. And I have a personal experience with that because last year, my father-in-law died from cancer. And he was in hospice for the year. And we had a stream of healthcare workers and other social workers and you name it coming through our house. And he coincidentally he was a victim of identity theft. And that identity theft went to both medical, that's why we think it was a healthcare worker, but it also went into taking out loans. And so that's the point. You don't know when, who, where, or how the identity theft happened in our particular case. It's not like the good old days where transactions were all physical, face-to-face. They happened with cash. The person making the pitch to you, it was pretty obvious. This is tongue-in-cheek with this snake oil salesman, but pretty obvious that it was fraud up front, right? Not the case anymore, particularly with healthcare. And I'm going to focus on that since it's 300 billion versus 40 billion. Again, everything I say here in some shape or form in terms of the underlying platform, because we're a technology company, applies to any of these insurance use cases. But with healthcare, it takes many forms. We talked about identity theft, but it's also a matter of, on the service provider side, you have some nebulous service providers that offer unnecessary treatments, or some of it can be even criminal where they're passing out prescriptions for things like oxycodone, right? Billing for services that were never performed, false diagnosis, test results that are for tests that are just unnecessary. Or you can do all sorts of things to hide these things, reclassify what's covered versus what's uncovered, even for what's covered, upcode it so that you can charge more for it, unbundle it so you can charge more for each individual piece of a particular complex medical protocol or treatment. All of this, what does it do? It pushes up the cost of healthcare, and then somebody from an insurance or the government tries to push more of that onto the actual those needing the services, so it increases co-payments. You increase the number of people that drop off insurance policies and still need healthcare, so they become part of what's called the uncompensated care pool, right? So this is something that just gets worse and worse by the year. And the reason is there's just so much data and there's so many interactions. And human beings are fine for picking out a pattern and discovering something when it's a limited set of data or something they can see with their eyes. Clearly, this is not. So you end up having to deal with large sets of data that only a computer with the right algorithms can figure out. And as you can see here, I put a few of the typical types of algorithms that would be used on this screen. So Bayesian theorem, logistics regression, decision trees, random forest, neural network, all of these are things that are used to classify, right? I want to be able to bucketize things into buckets where things that may be in one bucket are fine. Things that go into another bucket, which should be fewer and far between, are outliers or anomalies. And then it's with this pattern that I can describe, oh, something could be fraudulent. But the fact of the matter is an AI algorithm isn't going to tell you why something's fraudulent, how it's fraudulent, when it became fraudulent, how long it's been fraudulent. All those sorts of questions need to be answered based on context. And the context in this case is the business process, right? Well, let's look at that. What's the business process? Is a function of a business model. The business model in this case for the insurance industry is I've got somebody that I'm underwriting a policy for, doesn't matter what type of insurance. That policy has certain elements of coverage. I will cover this particular instance. I will cover it for these sets of service providers at a higher value, meaning you pay less of a deduction, or I'm not covering this particular service offering at all. You have to pay it out of pocket completely. I've got deductibles involved. All of this complexity has to be set up as an end-to-end process of you bringing somebody in, assessing the risk, underwriting a policy against that risk, having ongoing communications with them, and then as they get services rendered, dealing with them for the claims, reimbursements, if there's some exception handling for the disputes, etc. Same thing on the other side, right? So I've got the side of I'm underwriting a policy for a person, a group, to I'm going to offer services from a person, a general practitioner, or Joe's Auto Body Shop, or this particular builder for fixing a home after a tornado or whatever, right? Services rendered side. So I'm going to onboard from both sides. I'm going to have service level agreements, rates, et cetera, and then I'm going to reimburse them, and I have exception handling on that side as well. So as I'm bringing in all of these different types of data, I've built this baseline based on external records that are historical, financial, ID. I might classify these people. On the side of the consumer of insurance, maybe I'm classified, for example, as a male over 50. I'm clearly over 50. And maybe I have high blood pressure. Maybe I also, because I'm over 50 and I'm of African-American descent, I'm more likely to get colon cancer. So I need to go for diagnostics every so number of years for a colonoscopy. It's so much fun. And so in these particular cases, I've got demographic information involved, right? I've got a series of transactions that I'm building a baseline on. And I can also see that for the service provider side, okay, I went to get a colonoscopy. It's an outpatient treatment. There are several providers that provide that. How much do they charge in this particular district, this particular zip code or city or state or what have you? So I can figure out what should be the right level agreement for what I am willing to reimburse to that outpatient service for colonoscopy. I'm just making these up as I go, but the point is it's a lot of data coming from a lot of sources, both internal to the organization, external to the service provider that you're pulling in, external from the customer, and then external from other entities, the government, for example, or from third parties for the demographic information. All of this needs to be put in a unified data set. All that external data then is looked at three different levels. You as the individual, the service provider is an individual, that service provider, or you as part of a group, you as part of the group as the policy, etc. And then as a demographic. This is a lot of complexity in terms of the data. That data is diverse and it's disparate. And I try to bring all that data together and feed it through all those data sets into that set of AI algorithms. I may use different algorithms for different parts of that data set. I may use a different algorithm across the information or the assessments that are made by some of those downstream algorithms. But the algorithms in them of themselves are not enough. Remember, we talked about the context that has to be set by the business. The business model has certain policies. Those policies are then implemented, particularly with digital transformation, as process that is manifests itself in the running of a set of applications. So I have to combine all of that together to build a prediction. And all the prediction says is these things are bucketed and this is an anomaly. And based on the business rules, I believe that this is an error, simple error. Go back and change the billing code. Go back and this was a mistake, just a plain mistake. You're charging the wrong person. To it's abuse. The same provider or the same customer, same policyholder is making the same error over and over again. It's clearly abuse. To this provider or this particular person is doing something that goes beyond abuse. It is a criminal offense. Really, it's fraudulent. So I could do all of that in a unsupervised mode, fully automated, and I will invariably get a higher false positive, a higher set of false negatives, meaning I'm actually pissing off a particular service provider or customer because I'm saying everything is an error when it's not, or they're abusive, or they're even doing fraud when they're not, right? So I want to avoid too many false positives. But on the other hand, I don't want to, reduce my profits and increase my operating expenses by having a lot of negatives, false negatives, where they really should have been positives to this is an error, fix it, this is abuse, this is fraud, right? I may go back in and add additional data sets that may help. I may tune the algorithm. But sometimes I could use things that actually create demographic bias that, in this particular neighborhood, you're more likely to see car theft. Therefore, I should raise the rates up this high when I really should have raised them to this level. So that's the point, is that you really want humans involved that can interpret the data or have additional data they bring in to make an interpretation to better understand, so that I take that prediction as decision support, not the actual decision. I bring in a decision maker that has, a 10,000 Gladwellian hours of experience that's actually going to help make the actual decision, right? And these people are specialized. We call them business analysts, but in each insurance space, they can be very different. I've got an analyst that looks at what's the risk assessment around policies for this type of policy for somebody in this demographic for this type of service. What's the analysis of coding that I can determine what should be considered upcoding versus proper coding for these sets of treatments for this demographic. Once I've had these analysts look at things and they set the fraud rates and they say, okay, something is fraud. And maybe it's just a power user that decides that over a phone call with me because I call up and say, I don't think I should have been billed for this medical procedure to a call center agent. They're looking at that prediction. They're looking at what's been decided by analysts before, and they may then send it on to somebody equivalent to an analyst that's actually going to determine whether or not something was fraud, right? So you've got all these different people that are experts. Those experts all use different tools, right? So for example, they may use, if it's the analyst, they probably use Excel spreadsheets. So they've got to pull data from Excel spreadsheets. They may do their visualization and reporting across several different decisions that they're trying to make using Tableau or Looker or Power BI or MicroStrategy or any of these business intelligence types of tools. The investigators may use the same types of tools, but maybe in one particular case, it's outsourced to a different company. They use a different tool, but they need to be able to look at everything on a common platform. The data scientists, in order to reduce the number of false positives and negatives, may need to look at the algorithms to ensure that there wasn't drift, right? That they're continually tuning things to reduce the false positives and negatives. They might use Data Robot, or maybe they're more hands-on and use TensorFlow, or maybe they're actually coding in Python. Whatever it may be, you've got these different types of platforms that they need to be concerned with. So I'm now getting, after all this, to the actual platform. The reason I feel I get away with this is hopefully you've heard enough about Avalanche that as you've been listening to everything and the use cases, it's pretty clear by now, having that one platform that deals with all the disparate data that might come in from all these applications, all of these different repositories, much of it coming from external sources that maybe you may need to access through a web service API. It may come in a JSON semi-structured format. All of that has to be brought into the Avalanche platform. Again, you're bringing in for power users, business analysts, data scientists, all sorts of users that are non-IT. And so since they're non-IT, I want to bring that data in a way where it's drag and drop. I don't need development or coders. because on a daily basis, I may need to look at all these data sets as pieces of a puzzle. And I'm the one trying to solve the puzzle. I need direct access to the data as easily as possible. The other issue is that the pieces of the puzzle keep changing. There's additional pieces that I might be able to leverage to get things more accurate. So, for example, I want to leverage data from the healthcare instrumentation, the medical equipment. I want to pull data from cameras that are in the lobby in an emergency room. I want to pull data from, like if in the US, there's a Progressive app. They always talk about this pulling data from your car. For that matter, at an auto body shop, maybe I want to pull data from a BMW that's crashed and determine, the cause of the accident. The point is, it's IoT. It's all this data that's coming from the edge, and being able to use some of that at a minimum to be able to tune the algorithms, but at a maximum to actually use it for that current data set versus a historical baseline to get a more accurate diagnosis and prediction is really important. So with Actian Avalanche, I can get hands-on non-IT users pull in any data they want, and on the other side of running their analytics, be able to visualize and report with any tool. That's the key thing that you understand here. Now, I want to be able to do that across the entire business process. And that's something we know has happened with our customers for a fact. So take Actian, for example. They are a outsourcer for private insurance, a big outsourcer in the US, where they take tens of thousands of claims every day, and they look at those claims and have to return to the insurance provider, pay this claim, wait, you might not want to pay this claim. There's possibly an error. It's possibly across a set of errors, abuse. It's possibly fraud, because across that set of abuse, it's all the same, or the same provider, or the same customer, et cetera, et cetera. They've been able to do that so well that last year they got acquired. But we have looked at their data, and they're using the Actian Analytics data warehouse platform. And they've been able to reduce the time it takes them to do each of these batches from about 3.5 days, batches of claims, to 6 minutes. They've been able to get it to be much more accurate. And the speed at which they've been able to do it has enabled them to take on additional clients, and also to meet certain service level agreements with each of the clients, such that they've seen a 20% increase in their revenue. So this is all around claims. You can also look at this around the other end of the spectrum of, let me reduce my fraud and abuse by just upfront deciding what's the right assessment to make of the risk of someone, and should I even bring them on board as a policy holder or provider. So in the case of the Automobile Association in the UK, they have to do this in 2 seconds. That is, they have to figure out what's the risk of this person. Based on that risk, should I underwrite them a policy? Based on, should I underwrite them a policy? Okay, I'm going to do it. What should I quote as a price for it? And then offer them up a displayed quote in 2 seconds, because they have to compete against other people, and they want to make sure that they offer the right level so that they're profitable. And this is what they do with our platform. They also use the platform on the other end exactly the same way that I just described that Actian does, to look at the claims. So there's much more on this, because there's actually, after this, you'd have to listen to it because it's running in parallel to this. On demand, you can hear directly from the head of underwriting on the IT side, Paul Frith, who talks about what they do. I've run out of time now, but there's a myriad of cases that we have. I can give you a couple of examples that you can go look at where we're using Actian Avalanche directly online for healthcare provider fraud abuse detection. Also, just to give you a different market than we've talked about here, wireless subscriber fraud detection, where I look for somebody that's cloned a number, is running to the billing on a subscriber, unbeknownst to them that they're just basically getting a free set of phone calls. What I've shown you is really a risk assessment data analytics hub. After this, you can hear about a customer data analytics hub. Hint, it's the same. You can hear model management after this. Plenty of things. Go to our website at actian.com. Thank you so much, and have a great day.